Hello.
Hello. Sorry, no picture yet. Now we have a picture.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone.
Oh,
So while we're already here, what we have to actually figure out today, and this is a bit of organization work, is the announcement. So whether you want to do it as a blog or press release next week. If you could do me a favor, could you please, because it might actually work a bit faster, like all of those who are wanting to participate, please share one email address that we can drive the communication, because via Slack, in the CNCF Slack, as you cannot like notify the channel directly or on the issue was like rather slow. And I think we will need to access in real time. Yes, Kevin, if you just send a request for access, I'll grant it. It's just locked because we haven't published it yet.
hello. There were a couple of us on a different call because of a different meeting link.
Yeah, I think evidently Mike was too. I don't know how that happened. I just clicked the one in the calendar invite.
All right, there we go. Cool.
Kevin, did you request access already?
Hey,
I didn't get an email yet. Okay, Todd requested access. That's what I can see. Ah, there we go. There we go. So now you have to give me 1 minute to give all of you access. Send.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
Apparently we have two Zoom links still floating around here. So at least Justin and Tom also fell for the trap this time. So apologies for being late this morning. Cool. All right. Let's see. We want to go ahead and kick it off.
Actually, I already started because I think we really have to get the press release or a blog or whatever people want to announce, like really get it done today. Because it's Thursday and we should like really have it ready quickly. So the first thing you should do like really provide the email of who we should include in there. So I'm adding one more point that is called contacts. Please provide an email because we will need to sync like rather just in time over the next couple of days. And we will then ensure that we kick off the email thread with all people who are in here. So Peter already commented. I have just still to work in one comment of Peter. But if you want to provide a quote, either as an individual or as a company, please do this as well so other people can reuse it. So the rules are usually, okay, I have enough. Let me just get everybody a few access now. So that's priority number one. While I do this, so the rules are if you provide a quote, people can use it. They would obviously have to tell you that they're using it. Everybody is free to really pick and choose what they want and what they don't want. And we should sync on a timing when we announce it, so that pretty much everybody announces it at the same time, and it's not like one or kind of uncoordinated announcement. And I'm right now giving everybody access, so just bear with me for a minute. Okay. All right. So all of you should have access as of now. Who requested it, obviously. Yeah, so yeah, I think the important one is really the quotes that you want others to be able to use as part of this. One comment from Peter still has to, I have to work into the text. I will do this today. Yeah, and just please also add your name for contact details that we have a very fast turnaround now on this one. And yeah, agreement on when are we going to announce it. So we pretty much have the entire next week to do it as part of Kubecon. We just have to agree on a date. Usually, actually, later might be better, simply because many of you will have, especially those obviously from feature flagging companies, might have press briefings set up anyways where you want to mention it and then have the proper announcement. I think the Dynatrace team is currently looking into the 20th, which would be Friday. Maybe we do Thursday. But we can also do this via email. So we will propose one date, and this is where then the blog should go live. And timing wise, we will obviously pick something early in the morning, West Coast time, because that's the last time zone that goes online. So like something like 9 a.m. Pacific would be my preference. So anybody who has not yet requested access, please do so. And step 2, really provide the email addresses so we can move.
One question. We target May 20th, right? So it's Friday.
Sorry?
If I understood correctly, we target May 20th, which is Friday.
May 20th or 19th. I think both would definitely work. But it allows everybody to run their press briefings where they also might want to mention it. They can brief their press contacts that they're going to announce something, and then it would be the end of the week. And I think it also gives us the most headway for those of you who have still internal conversations to be had here.
Thank you.
So
okay, yeah, Eloise, if that's it for the press release, thanks for that. Mike, maybe you want to get started on your points.
Yeah, please. I just have to point out, please add your contact details. We have, for most of you, we don't have the email addresses. The Flagsmith people have added them, but please add them. Otherwise, we can't reach out to you and can't coordinate there. And I'll bother you a bit at the end of the meeting again with details, yes, but then I'll let you jump right to the more technical topics. But this is now really time sensitive. That's why I'm pressing really hard on getting this done right now.
Cool. All right, thanks, Eloise. Looks like there's a handful of newcomers. There's just, I'm not sure if it's all in alphabetical order here or not, but if people want to quickly just introduce themselves if you're new to the meeting, then we can go ahead and get started. So I guess I'll hand it off to Tom first. If you want to go ahead, and then just, yeah, anyone else wants to jump in.
Hey everyone, I'm Tom. I'm a staff engineer at Skillshare. Previously worked at Dynatrace, and excited to be working with and on OpenFeature. We actually use Split.io at Skillshare, so it's interesting to see the developments that are happening here. And I have no idea who's new, so whoever's next wants to pick up.
I can pick it up. So I'm Alinoe Abrassa. I work for Datadog. I'm a team lead there, and we currently use an in-house solution to feature flags. And I'm here to figure out a bit what the fuss is about and try to see if we have some way to actually collaborate with that effort to improve on our solution.
Perfect. Welcome. Thanks. Anyone else? Cool.
Yeah, I'm Wyatt. I'm a software developer at a company based in London called Topical, and I'm one of the maintainers of the OpenSLO specification. And I'm mainly interested in seeing how I could, what this is about, and how I could make it work with post hoc, a product analytics and future flag solution, open source solution.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. All right. So we can kick it off now. First thing I wanted to chat about real quick was just the project roadmap and workflows. Really, I'd kind of like to get everyone's feedback on how we want to formalize that. I have some ideas right now of what likely should be done for in an alpha, beta, and kind of release and GA release stages. But how we want to basically talk about that as a community and decide which are considered priorities. My proposal would be I can open up a GitHub issue just listing out the different major topics that need to be addressed. If we can come to some reasonable consensus there, I can either create issues associated with each of those high level objectives or create a GitHub roadmap. I'm not exactly sure what people's preference are in that regard, or which one works better than the other. For better or worse, I have a lot more experience with Jira than some of the GitHub management tools. So if anyone has a strong preference on what would be the preferred solution there, let me know, and we can start collaborating on what would be considered alpha ready spec. I think would be the main priority here, and that's kind of to Justin's point too.
If you want, we can talk a bit about the roadmap and composition and the representation in Valencia. So if you have some time on Monday, we can chat. Or maybe.
Yep, that sounds great. Yeah, and if anyone else has any ideas, I'll try to start with probably a GitHub issue. I think that makes probably the most sense to just quickly dump out like all of the high level topics. I'll post it in the Slack channel. We can go back and forth, kind of collaborate there. And once we kind of define what makes the most sense, we can either do issues or roadmaps, so whatever the preference is there. And that could actually be maybe chatted about in that issue as well. So that was just a high level topic. Is there any immediate feedback on that proposal?
Great, let's use GitHub.
It works for me.
Yeah, definitely not proposing Jira. So no, GitHub would be it. It's just, is it roadmap or is it issues, and what layer of abstraction of issues is the most useful here, and things like that would be the main questions I have.
I think roadmap might be a good way to go. So far across the different repos, like keeping up with all the issues from a bunch of other GitHub notifications, a roadmap would give it a nice place to see everything.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
For GitHub, we currently use projects beta. So one which allows to provide multiple views. So we can create slices, for example, for technical side, for the community, for marketing and outreach, and still have a single roadmap. So we have recently created a prototype in Captain of moving to projects beta. And yeah, we can work with Mike and with everyone who's interested to set up POC here as well.
Yeah, perfect. Let's sync up next week then, and we can kind of go through that. But I think having that higher level roadmap would be very beneficial for everyone here to be on the same page and know what we're currently working on. So I'll hopefully have an update by the next community sync, and then I'll try to work through some of these as an issue, so we can kind of asynchronously collaborate on that. Cool. Next topic was OpenTelemetry. I did open up a pull request. Was kind of scolded for it. I did not have an issue in OpenTelemetry spec for the pull request, so I guess that's the pro tip. If you ever want to contribute to the OpenTelemetry spec, make sure you have an issue first. So I did open up the issue. They did kind of mention, not sure how impactful this will be, but in the pull request itself, they mentioned that they needed to determine if it was something they even wanted to merge in. So there is a bit of kind of discussion about if this is potentially out of scope. I do not think it is. I think it's actually very valuable in a distributed trace, but if you could take a look at the proposal, add feedback, GitHub reactions, whatever, to kind of show that there is broad interest in this topic. If you have any questions specifically on what this provides, certainly reach out to me, or even better, ask on that issue so we can clarify anything that maybe is a misunderstanding there. But I did try to lay out like how it would look like in Zipkin, which then would apply to basically most of the observability vendors that are spec compliant. Any questions on that topic? Cool. Next one is the OpenFeature brand refresh. So we talked about it a little bit at the last community sync, but after kind of the Hacker News post came out, and we saw very clearly there was some confusion around some of the messaging. I've been trying to look at that situation a bit, and part of that was trying to define the mission and vision. So I do have a pull request open for that. I appreciate the comments so far. If there's anything else to add, please do that soon. I'd like to try to merge that in today if possible. Of course, we could continue to amend it over time, but I'd like to get that in so we can reference that on the website. I also have a couple more proposals for the logo. It is not something that's likely going to blow your mind at this point. If anyone is a graphic artist or know a graphic artist that wants to help out, certainly let me know. But I like it better than the light switch. And so I think unless I get some serious pushback, we may just go forward with one of the proposals just to have something now. We could consider it a beta logo if you will, and we can certainly improve it later. But I do have a link in the docs here if you want to take a look at the proposal. There's a couple other variations too, but they're all kind of playing with the same design. Related to that, I called in a favor with one of my buddies. He's helping to refresh the website. Not a whole lot to show at this point, but I'm hoping to have something maybe later today. So I'll post it in the Slack channel. You guys can take a look at it. One of the core things that I'd like to do though is to not have a whole lot of copy on the site itself. It's kind of just a high level placeholder with a really high level description, and try to get people back to GitHub as quickly as possible. Mainly so we don't have outdated copy there and we have to maintain it in multiple places, things like that. It's something that we can of course improve over time. If we need to add more content to the website, we certainly can, but I think at this stage it's nice to just get the basic premise across on the site and then lead them back to GitHub where most of the action's taking place.
For some pages we can just configure import through Git models or other tools, because Hugo supports it through plugins. Initial website was just copy paste of GitHub, and we moved content from one place to another quite a few times. But if we agree to put it on GitHub, which totally makes sense, then we can just build sites from various GitHub pages, from even in different repositories if needed. But again,
okay, yeah, that makes sense. That might be something else we can chat about too and figure out exactly what the best approach is. But certainly don't want to have a bunch of different places that we have to maintain for life basically. So if we can try to have a single source of truth in most cases, I think that would be beneficial here. And then the last thing is the Kubecon T-shirts came in. If you are interested, they looked like this is the dark version. We have a white version, which is like the inverse, and actually the toggles flip to the other direction, which is, I don't know, I thought was kind of fun. So that was kind of a cool little thing that came in. If you're going to be in Valencia, let me know what your T-shirt size preference is. They're US sizes, and I'll make sure to save you one. If you're not going to be there, let me know anyways. If I have extras, I'll set some aside for the next time I see you, hopefully in Detroit. But yeah, that's a pretty exciting piece of swag, I guess. Cool. And I think that's it for me. Any questions on that, any of those topics? No? Perfect. Okay. Todd, just hand it off to you then.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. So Mike's gonna he's gonna take over scribe duty while I while I do my bit. Okay, so yeah, quick update on the spec. We merged the aspect of the spec that really defined hooks. That's definitely an important feature, a really cool feature that I think makes OpenFeature, adds a lot of utility. So thanks a lot, because Justin Abrams actually headed that up. We had, as usual, a lot of participation from the community. That's all merged now. Feel free to take a look at it. We also have the evaluation context aspect of the spec. There's a PR open for that. Please go ahead and take a look at that. That one's not too long. It's not too complicated. We're not talking about any of the really fancy or complicated implicit context propagation that we've kind of touched on before via continuations or thread local storage or anything like that. It's really just the structure of the context objects and the first class kind of fields that are going to be defined there, so they can be easily mapped to providers that need those fields. There's certain fields that providers are really interested in, and we want to make sure that they're kind of captured in the spec so that things can be made consistently across different providers. Yeah, so what's next? Events are probably likely the last piece for an alpha or a beta, depending on how important we kind of think they are. I know Pete, who doesn't seem to be here today, was specifically really concerned about events for the client, which I think makes a lot of sense. For specifically for JavaScript clients, be they web or not. So I agree with that. We may want to discuss whether or not we want events to be kind of part of our first alpha release of the spec. And we can also kind of we can talk about how detailed and how well defined we want our basic event API to be. So it could just be, flags were fetched, fire an event for that. A lot of SDKs, do a kind of polling, or they do some kind of server push that indicates to the SDK that flags have been updated. So we could fire events when that happens. There's also probably the onReady event that could be useful for initializing applications that are using a client-side implementation.
Actually, to really quick jump into there, the onReady event is something that we've sort of masked in the current demo environments right now, in a sort of hacky way. If you want to look at the playground repo, you can see what we're doing. So it may be important, but to Todd's point, it may not be something that's absolutely required for an alpha spec, but very likely important before GA at least. And so we can kind of define the importance of that. Maybe if you want to put a proposal out there, Todd, we can get some kind of issue out there, and we can kind of discuss how important we feel that piece is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. As a takeaway, I'll open an issue to kind of start this discussion if there isn't one that's already kind of in that vein, which I'll just bring attention to. Yeah, and then likely once we get once we get the evaluation context stuff merged and defined, and once we decide what we want to do with events, we're probably at the stage where we should do a final review of the spec as it stands, in prep for an alpha release, some kind of official alpha release. Anybody have any questions on any of the spec stuff? Cool. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the playground. So we had a repository called SDK Research previously that's been renamed to Playground. And as the name suggests, the idea now is that you can kind of test out new providers. You can test out the existing providers we have, and just kind of play around with the OpenFeature concepts there. we made a we're kind of trying to funnel people who are interested in playing with the technical aspects of OpenFeature to this repository. So obviously there's kind of a demo that's been highlighted and kind of pushed to the top of the README in that repo. Like I said, that repo has been renamed from SDK Research to Playground. So I'm going to do a demo of the demo, which will take a few minutes. Yeah, feel free to pull it down and run it yourself if you want. We're probably also going to record a video that will be very similar to what I'm about to demo and post it on YouTube so that people who don't actually want to pull all the source and run the project can get an idea of what OpenFeature does at a high level. So I'm going to run that now. I'll share my screen. So I'm going to give very little introduction or background because that's kind of the whole idea of the demo. Basically, the README just tells you how to run it, which I just did. And then we can open the UI. So I'm just going to go through it. It's basically has a guided kind of tour. I'm just going to read what's here. You guys can pull it on your own if you'd like to see it or stay tuned for the recording. Welcome to the OpenFeature demo. This is the landing page for our fictional killer app, Fibonacci as a service. First, a few things about OpenFeature and this demo. Use these buttons to toggle the editor or resume the tour at any time. OpenFeature defines abstractions that allows the use of a single API to evaluate feature flags no matter where your feature flags are managed, a SaaS vendor, an in-house implementation, OpenFeature's cloud-native solution, or even a file. For this demo, we get flag definitions from a simple JSON file, which you can modify with this embedded editor. Let's get started learning how OpenFeature is helping the authors of our fictional service manage this landing page. The company has been in the process of changing the name of our app, but legal hasn't quite finished the process yet. Here, we've defined a simple Boolean flag, new welcome message, that we can use to update the name instantly without redeploying our application. Use the editor to change the state of the Boolean new welcome message flag to enable click anywhere outside the editor to apply the change. So I'll just do what it says. Great. So now you see the name changed up here. Now let's look into a flag with an associated string value. The design team is frequently experimenting with new color palettes. Let's change our landing page's color. Use the editor to change the default variant of the hex color flag to match any of the defined variants. So it's blue right now. We'll just do red. Snazzy choice. Maybe you're a designer yourself. Feature flags provide a great means of allowing team members who aren't engineers to control selected aspects of application characteristics. Let's give the Fibonacci calculator a try. Give it a click. Turns out calculating Fibonacci at n recursively isn't exactly efficient. Luckily, top minds at our company have found a more efficient algorithm for calculating Fibonacci at n. It's experimental, so we only want to allow employees to test it. Let's see how OpenFeature can help with that. Click here to log in. Enter an email ending with @fast.com and click login. So let's do click login. Flag evaluations can take into account contextual information about the user, application, or action. The fib algo flag returns a different result if our email ends with @fast.com. Let's run the Fibonacci calculator again as an employee to test the new algorithm. Much better, but we should enable this for all users soon. And you can see there's a more complicated flag here that actually defines some very basic rules. And that's what we just saw demoed. Thanks for taking this quick tour of OpenFeature. In the latest version, which I pushed, but I didn't demo it here, we have an additional panel here, an additional tour step here that simply says, hey, you can relaunch this demo with any SaaS vendor, any SaaS provider, and have it kind of use that instead of this file backend. So I'll actually restart that and demonstrate what I mean. So now instead of running the JSON demo, I'm going to run the, let's pick on launch directly. So now you'll see if I refresh the page, once everything's running. I can now control the same demo with Launch Darkly. So I'll just close out of the tour, and I'll close the editor too, and I'll change one of these values. Let's go to the hex color flag. I'll change this to green. And you can see it's green. So it's the exact same demo. None of the code has changed. We've just switched our backends. So that's kind of the whole idea of the demo. It's to kind of walk you through these concepts. I think that's it. So if anybody has any questions about this, feel free to ask them now. You can definitely pull it yourself. It's all in the README. It's relatively easy to set up. It's just a couple steps. At least if you want to get the JSON provider working, which is good just for understanding some of the key concepts, and then you can hook it up to any provider we have defined.
I think this is awesome. I think the one thing I would mention is the thing on the right is not OpenFeature.
Yeah. So this is just a JSON provider. Yeah, I mean, if you have more thoughts on how we can kind of qualify that, I'm totally open. It is confusion that I'm concerned about, so I don't want anybody to mistake, this JSON file provider as what OpenFeature is, right? It's just a demo. It's just one provider of many. I think that's kind of the point you're trying to make. So if you have any tips of how we can kind of highlight that in the demo, totally, I think that's a great idea.
I'll probably take it. Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry, I think this is awesome. Yeah, I wonder whether the initial JSON provider might be easier for people to understand if it was like if maybe there was like a simple version and then a more advanced version, the one that like maybe just had a Boolean and just had a value. Because that initial document is, there's like quite a lot going on.
So that's a good point. What I tried to do was kind of highlight the different parts here with this mask functionality. So like this, but what we probably could do, to your point, is actually dynamically add the text. So we could start with just the Boolean flag and then maybe add the hex color flag. We could do that maybe if that partially addresses kind of what you're suggesting. I was kind of trying to strike a balance between not making things overcomplicated, but also showing some of the more powerful features. One of the things that came out of this Hacker News post was that people think of feature flags as static and on or off. Some people do, because that's the implementation they're familiar with. They're not familiar with the more complicated, like user targeting stuff. So I wanted to show that, but also not overwhelm people. So I see your point. And maybe, I don't know, maybe what I proposed is a partial solution to that. Feel free to agree or disagree. Yeah, or put out any other ideas.
I think like my experience is that I'm constantly having to try and remind myself that there's like a huge spectrum of understanding, all the way from like, don't even know what they are conceptually to, wanting to do multivariate tests with blah, 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 blah. So I think maybe starting with a simpler file and then adding to it would be super helpful. And then the folk who are like, want to get to into the weeds of it and, can it do rules and all this sort of stuff, can jump forward. But there's definitely folk out there like, who don't even know conceptually what they are.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I do worry that the JSON provider is going to get confused with, what is available otherwise. And if you add sections as it goes along the demo, it almost feels like it's reinforcing the JSON provider for it, where you could do something like just key values to start and have, like Justin was saying, that advanced demo that does more targeting or something.
I'm gonna file a ticket on this and I'll link it so we can all complain about Todd's awesome work.
Yeah, I mean, to provide a bit more context here, one of the problems to some extent is like the entry barrier was a bit high. Like if you had to to test it out, sign up for a Launch Darkly or a Flagsmith account or whatever, and then you had to manually create all of the flags and stuff. We wanted to kind of lower the barrier, but still show the flexibility. If you are interested, the playground, I did take a crack at a very simple flag config, like JSON schema. So this is actually, it runs through like a very basic schema for validation here. But yeah, the point still stands. Perhaps we could even potentially have something above that shows like the provider being used, and you could literally potentially even dynamically adjust that with like a drop down or something. Could be an option.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. That's something that we talked about earlier, and I actually don't think it would be crazy hard. So we could, for instance, this might make things a little bit brittle, but we could add like a drop down or icons like Mike's suggesting somewhere on the screen where you could literally click and it would switch to a different provider. We could do that, but it does require whoever's running the demo, and if they have no idea what's going on, they probably don't have an account. It does require them to have a key configured for the various providers, right? So that is the kind of thing that we were trying to remove some friction around that, just to get the concepts understood.
Cool. So I'll add this ticket in here. Thanks, Justin. The other thing that we could potentially do is like just make sure that in the video that we record and maybe associate with this project, we could make it extremely clear that this is just for demo purposes or something. So yeah, definitely add some comments to the ticket that Justin created, and we'll try to address them as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, my point would be we want to have the distinction between what OpenFeature does, like at the feature SDK and the providers, which we should obviously explain, and then have this distinction between the flagging bits and pieces like the SDKs and the feature management system, and make whether everybody is fine like distinguishing between the two of them, like the one where you define them as part of your code, which is the flags, and the other one, the feature management system, and whether this is nomenclature that everybody would be fine, or we could also like put it in an issue. And then also make this as like part even of the high level architecture when we describe things, because the right part is the feature flag management system, the left part is the application with the feature flags.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Eloise. Exactly the terminology you're using is the glossary terminology we have.
Okay.
So we call this a feature flag management system and a provider. So maybe we could add some headings to kind of help that. The other thing that we did discuss briefly is we could add every step where we kind of show the different flags being used in the app. We could have some kind of rendered code snippet, maybe actually pulling from the real source code that would show like, here's how this flag is actually being evaluated. Here's the flag evaluation API calls related to this. But we could do something like that.
I had some questions. So I was reading the spec, but maybe I just don't understand it fully yet. But so it's meant like this demo shows like different kinds of feature flag values you can have. You can have like a Boolean value, like a string, and like JSON. Is it expected that every provider supports that, or is it? I couldn't really find a lot of details in the spec. What is expected of the providers to support?
So there is a provider system in the spec. Sorry, go ahead.
So the feature flag system I'm using only supports like Boolean and like a string value, but not like a whole JSON object or things like that. Is it something that must be implemented, or I'm just wondering how to work with that kind of limitations.
Yeah, so the current spec, I mean, is obviously a draft, but there is a provider section that defines the specific methods that they need to implement, and everyone is required to produce a JSON object. However, even some of the providers we currently have that support JSON objects don't directly support that in their backend per se. So the easy way around it is just encode JSON as a string. Now, you don't, and then like the details of that are all kind of up to your provider. So it may not be that your specific backend supports objects as a first class kind of value or sorry, feature flag value type. But there's ways around that. Like I said, it could just be encoding a string. But the idea right now is that all providers will kind of support that basic feature set. If you have ideas or you disagree with that kind of at a high level, that's something you could discuss in the spec. Feel free to open up an issue. But like I said, right now, we definitely support providers that don't have object value support as a first class kind of use case. And in most cases, what they're doing is just storing objects as strings and doing some amount of parsing so that we can have a consistent API on the back end. And exactly how that works is really up to the provider. So OpenFeature doesn't prescribe how that's done. That's all done in the implementation of the provider.
Right, and also to quickly just jump in, it's like if it's not supported by the provider, it would just return the default value. So it wouldn't be ideal, but basically the provider would have no way to actually return the appropriate type, and it's probably better to, I guess, be aware of that than try to mask it in any way. So hopefully that's clear. If not, I would definitely recommend opening a ticket and we can discuss it there.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. Todd, you want to do it? We should do the next part really quickly so we can get to Justin's topic.
Yeah, I won't take too long. The only, I mean, we kind of talked about this already, but the next steps, make a video like we talked about, and that kind of thing. So I think really we went over all of this stuff. Oh, and then there's the Node SDK. Pardon me. Yeah. So the last bit I think we should mention, which is this is a good lead into. Right now, what you're seeing, what I just demonstrated, was using our kind of our playground implementation of the Node OpenFeature SDK. We do have basically scaffolding for a proper official Node SDK now. It's being published to NPM, even though it's basically an empty package. It's being published as an alpha. So eventually what we're going to do is, as we progress, we're going to tear pieces of this application out and replace them with real implementations. So the kind of toy SDK implementation that is powering this right now will be replaced with the official SDK implementation. I mean, there's not much more to say around that. Like I said, we're publishing a package in the OpenFeature scope in NPM right now. It's basically just a stub, but very soon we'll actually start adding real functionality there. I won't go into the ES module or common JS stuff. I think that's probably too fine detail for this talk. So unless there's any other questions, I think that's it for me.
Okay, so Java SDK is mostly spec compliant at this point. It had the big missing item it has is support for structures. I haven't quite figured out how to do objects nicely. So that's the big missing piece there. It could benefit from review from someone who's not me. So if you have some Java skill, please give it a look and provide feedback. One of the things that I've done in the Java SDK is I've annotated test cases with which portions of the spec they validate. And that's currently done by hand. We need some mechanism to make sure I got them all and the text is correct. And so to that end, I think we need a discoverable place where I can fetch the combined spec JSONs. So I can like see all the numbers and validate all the numbers exist in our code without having to like crawl a Git repository as a Gradle build task. I can file a ticket for that work. And then I just had a bunch of questions as I went through implementing all the spec stuff that just didn't quite make sense. And if we just want to skip these, that's fine, but I'll provide folks an opportunity to say what the answer was. We provide in the hooks thing, we provided a mechanism for hook hints to be merged from like API client into invocation last wins. But I'm struggling to remember why we did that.
I'd like to see the exact part of the spec you're talking about, but the only thing that comes to mind, and maybe it was actually maybe it was kind of a mistranslation somewhere, and it was supposed to be context merging, but there's context injected at various levels and then context needs to be merged. So, you know, you may have on the API have defined properties in the context with a certain value, and you want to override them at an evaluation level, at invocation level. I think that was where the merge kind of would come in. And I'm not sure if there was a kind of a mistranslation and that got applied to hook hints, or it was intentional to apply to hook hints, because it could be a similar situation there. But that's probably what, it's probably something like that happened. We should review. There's some confusion around it.
I'll file a ticket to remove that language then, because it doesn't make sense to me as the implementer. I think we need to be more crisp on where, like, how exceptions are going to be handled. I think it's very clear how exceptions are handled if they occur in flag evaluation itself, in a before hook or an after hook, which is the framework itself catches that exception and sets some error values. The two places that's not clear to me is when we trigger error flows, if that also throws an exception, does that bubble to the user, or do we swallow that again? I think that's really
There's been a lot of discussion and back and forth on this. I think it's probably worth like having another issue where we actually nail it down, but there was a lot of desire in the early points of development for the ability to actually get some idea of what was happening with errors. So there's a proposal initially to say, hey, if we intentionally throw in an error or unintentionally throw in an error handler, it should bubble up. And obviously this isn't even applicable to every language. Some languages don't have throwing semantics, but that was the kind of the idea. I think it's probably worth opening up an issue to discuss it further and really hammer it out. A lot of these issues were kind of hard to, in retrospect, I think a lot of these issues were really hard to figure out on really big PRs where we're defining a lot of stuff. And it will probably be easier now to open smaller PRs and smaller issues scoped to just 1 or 2 points. So it's probably good to do that at this point. That's my take at least.
Yeah. On the similar on error stuff, the provider spec 2.8 says in the case of abnormal execution behavior, ... you have to set the error code. I think that this isn't the case where things are bad enough that we're triggering some error condition, but it's not so bad as to like we would throw an exception. Like as I went to go implement this, I realized that it sounded a lot like these providers also needed to account for exception handling code and then set appropriate error handling.
Should we do this at all? I mean, should a feature flag due to failure ever break the application? Because worst case, if the exception doesn't get caught, you might break the application code.
Yeah, we've had this come up, and we've been like of the opinion that we should never do that, and that like maybe like falling back to a default flag handler or some sort of sane defaults. Yeah.
So that is the paradigm. That's how everything is spec'd out. The only place where it gets tricky, and I think that's what Justin kind of started on, is when we're talking about errors in user-defined functions. And even CloudBees, for example, makes this distinction. So if you're adding a specific function or handler to the SDK, how do we want that to behave? Is it always in that case we catch your error, or do we allow you the power to throw errors in there? That's kind of where things get a little bit gray. Because I agree in general, we never want flag evaluation to ever bubble up, ever cause abnormal execution. But if you're attaching your own specific handler and you do something intentionally to throw in there, then we just have to decide. I'm not saying that that should be that should bubble up. I think we just have to talk about it. But it's slightly different than basic flag evaluation. And CloudBees, just for instance, again, CloudBees actually allows that as an option. So they'll say basically, do you want us to swallow these errors, or do you want us to rethrow them in your user code? So we could do something like that. But
yeah, I think that requires an issue.
Mainly,
Yeah, and I think basically exactly what Todd just mentioned, and what what hook maybe could throw if we really wanted to. And I definitely would prefer probably to do everything in our power to not bubble errors up to users, except maybe in that one situation. So let's discuss that there. I think what Justin was talking about in this particular piece though, is like actually like doing error mapping between providers to like the spec code. So one of the things we had mentioned was like having maybe well-known errors saying like, you know, flag not found and whatever, coming back from the details call. That would require a bit of work potentially to like capture the error or map the codes to whatever we deemed, you know, appropriate in the spec. Is that correct, Justin? That's what you're asking here?
Yeah, and I'm just validating that this is something we're expecting the providers to do.
Within
we're not
reason,
really-
yes.
Their own like exception handling and all this other stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Mike's exactly right. Like I think this came from something that's been brought up a couple times. I think Alois has brought it up a couple times, but other people as well. Where so the flag defaulted because something happened in the SDK. Some SDKs provide metadata about what went wrong. So LaunchDarkly, for example, will provide an error, some kind of reason that contains an error in some cases that says, okay, well, I couldn't connect to the API. There was an authentication issue. The API is down. Like it was a DNS black hole because this person has an ad blocker. It could be anything like that. And we're trying to define a mechanism to expose those underlying error reasons in the detailed evaluation API. And so I think that's kind of where Justin's rubbing up against some ambiguity. But that was the goal of the specific one.
And then, so I think that makes sense to me. The last one is we should square away how we're numbering these spec files.
Yeah, that's a good one. Todd, do you want to?
My bad. I'm not married to the number scheme at all. We don't even have to number them. We can name them. We can not have any identifier. I kind of like the idea of identifiers for deep linking, but it also makes things a little bit brittle, perhaps. And certainly we have to sanity check them. So that's a good call out.
My only request is that whatever we choose be statically validatable.
Yeah, does anyone have an opinion on that? I mean, for just ease, it may be nice to start at 1 for every new dedicated file. It seems like it's going to be kind of a nightmare to figure out like each portion of the spec, like what new number that starts at. And I don't know if that really provides a whole lot of value, but I could be wrong. I guess it also depends on if we want to merge all of that or something at the end.
We could have an integer at the top of the spec file that has to match the prefix version, for instance, but we should validate this somehow. I mean, it's probably not like a pressing 911 issue, but I think maybe we need to create an issue for it, decide if we want numbers at all. I mean, we don't have to roll with that at all at this point.
All right, so the action item there is you'll create a issue for that. We can quickly discuss what we want to do. It doesn't. I don't think it's really probably matters either way. We just need to make a decision and do it relatively quickly so everything can be consistent.
Yeah.
Great. Looks like that's all the agenda items. Anyone else have anything else to add?
Just to add, we've started on the Python SDK. It's kind of maybe halfway along as a sort of implementation. So definitely by the next call, hopefully there'll be something in a reasonable state that someone else can look at.
Great, perfect. Thanks for the update. I think Todd and I are going to continue to work on the node one as well. Our availability next week will be a little limited with Kubecon and everything. So there may be a slight pause there, but I guess keep track of that repo as well. We just got an update in the channel too that let's see, Dave from Harness is going to continue to work on the Golang SDK, which is great. And then it looks like we're also making good progress on the Java one. So making pretty good progress on those 4 fronts, which is pretty exciting. Cool. Sure.
I have one more question. Are there also any plans to like write any best practices when using this, or like using feature flags in general? Because I can imagine there's people that are not well versed in feature flags might be interesting how you would test these feature flags when you use them. It could be maybe an interesting white paper, like how would you use test code that use feature flags like backend side or front end side, and when you have these how to say encapsulated library over the feature flag vendors. Maybe it would be nice to discuss that too.
If I
Can say that
understand what you're
Launch Darkly
saying,
has a really
maybe
great
one of
ebook.
the, sorry, go ahead.
I can say that Launch Darkly has a really great ebook that they put out with O'Reilly on feature flagging and how to do it and what it means and all these sorts of things. And it's like 30 pages of content, but super dense and good as a resource.
I think you posted that in the Slack channel before, and it did seem really interesting. So feel free to post it again or add it to the community notes for today, because it definitely seemed dense, very good, but also dense and probably worth taking a look at. Yeah, it seemed like there was a lot of good info in there. I skimmed a little bit of it. The other thing, maybe I got maybe if I understood your question or your proposal, I think one thing that if I understood, one thing that we might do as part of SDKs is provide mock provider implementations or something like that, to make mocking and unit testing easy. Like that would be a relatively easy thing to do, but like have some provider that's easily configured in idiomatic unit testing code, or a mock provider, or even a mock API implementation, so that in your unit tests you could make the feature flagging API behave as you want to evaluate your particular code path of interest. Like that would be I think a cool first class tool.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And I do think that's something we should address as soon as we get a little bit further along with the spec and some of the SDKs become available. So yeah, good point. Thanks for bringing that up. It does look like Eloise wants to mention one more thing before we quickly wrap up. And then
Yeah, I think it's general discussion. So what I really learned during this PR initiative, that it was like really hard to reach you on a time sensitive basis. So I was GitHub issues weren't working that great. Slack, as we use the CNCF Slack, I can just notify people. You can only post because you can neither use adhere or add channel. So should we create a mailing list or anything else where we can really reach out if we need something from people easily? Because that was honestly really painful. We got some replies, but it was hard to get these type of conversations started. I'm also thinking if we going forward, I don't know, like to have an OpenFeature or something like this where people can subscribe, and I can be sure that I can reach everybody who joins, even if I don't have like the email address available where they can simply subscribe to. It might be solved at some point if you get their own Slack, to be fair. But I wanted just to bring it up. It was really not easy to have a conversation where I could get people notified so I get responses in time. And I think we might need this going forward. And I'm not at all tied to the solution. I think it's just something that would be helpful. And just sharing that neither GitHub or Slack work perfectly for these type of conversations.
I would suggest that if you want immediate and tight feedback loops, Slack is not, email is not going to be better than Slack. Like my experience is that people check Slack more often than they check their email and are more.
Yeah, I mean, then we would need our own Slack because every channel notification and everything has been turned off on the CNCF Slack. Also fine going for this.
So the issue that you're having is that you have time sensitive things that you would like answers to, but
yeah, if something like a PR or something comes up, or like we get an invite, say to speak to an analyst, and I want to involve any of you, it's hard to really notify you that you actually see the notification somewhere, because right now it's a rather passive and relying on people to read it while actively getting it pushed to them. I think the issue with GitHub is the same that we all have. We just get so many GitHub notifications, most likely, that one of these can get easily buried. And yeah, for Slack, it's just that, as I mentioned, the official one doesn't allow us to notify people.
Yeah, I would be very happy to be included on a list of people who can be pinged,
Mhm.
And you can just at my name if you would like.
We can also keep that list. It will obviously be restricted to the people that are on that list, that you don't get 200 calls from salespeople trying to sell you whatever they want to sell you or something like that. I just wanted to bring it up because over the last couple of days, Dora, I think nothing's preventing us from having our own Slack channel. We just did not do it yet. I think that's the only thing, because we had no final agreement on Slack versus Discord. I think that was a discussion for some point.
Yeah, I think the other piece is that we would lose discoverability that we get by just being in the CNCF Slack. And so we should make a decision on whether that discoverability is worth the ability to add people.
But Dora was even having trouble. I know we're over time, so if you have to drop, feel free. Yeah, appreciate everyone's time here. Thanks. But yeah, this is something we should probably try to figure out, because even Dora had trouble joining the CNCF Slack, which is obviously a pretty major barrier and definitely a bummer.
So I create an issue how like we want to handle like this more real-time communication, and people can then comment on it. Let's see how it's there. All right.
Yep. Sounds good.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Talk to you later. Bye.